So I'm out here at one of my favorite local parks. Try to get up here right around dawn. Running a little late, got here a little after 7 a.m. Parking lot was already full. I had to park across the 2-lane highway and then run across. Conditions haven't been great. I actually came out here, the forecast had called for a chance of rain. Originally it was supposed to be a chance of storms and then dropped like 5% chance of rain up until about 5, 6 a.m. So I was hoping maybe plane flies overhead, I'd get some rare summer moody atmosphere conditions in Texas, but not in the cards today. But still, I think I got up here early enough. I had some decent light for some small scene photography. And yeah, we'll see how these shots turn out. If you look closely in the far shadows, you can just make out the faint outline of a twisted, gnarled tree that fell into this cove off Eagle Mountain Lake a while ago. I had actually wanted to shoot this tree when I was here a couple months ago, but I hadn't seen it until I was on the trail along the opposite shore and I couldn't find a good angle to capture it well enough. When I wandered down a side trail to this location on this visit, I soon realized I had a great view of the tree and its reflection in the morning light. I also knew immediately that I would want to process the image in black and white to really emphasize the tortured shape of the dead branches. In Lightroom, I added a slight crop to eliminate some of the brighter patches of sunlight along the upper portion of the frame, and then used a fair number of local brush adjustments to dodge and burn, separating the tree even more from the rather busy background woodland. This composition wasn't something I originally planned, but as I wrapped up with the dead oak in the previous scene, my eye caught sight of the sunlight just starting to catch the foliage of this tree overhanging the calm water. I plan to revisit this shot in the future, as I'd like to see if I can catch it when the sunlight may be just hitting the leaves on the overhanging tree without falling on the background quite as much. I don't know if the angles will work out to make it happen, but given this park is only 20 minutes or so from my house, it's close enough to come back regularly. Of course, I'd love to capture this with some morning fog, but being in Texas, we're lucky to have such conditions more than once or twice a year. To maintain cohesiveness with the prior image, I decided to process this in black and white, and once again relied on local dodging and burning to help tone down the background and make this unique tree stand out from its surroundings. Looking at it now, I may come back to this and lighten the leaves up just a bit more, as I feel I may have brought those highlights down too much. As always, I'll let the image sit for another week or so before looking at it with fresh eyes and renewed perspective, but I suspect I'll be doing some more tweaking before I call this one finished. Exploring the area a little further, this clump of reeds along the far shore caught my eye, not only for the dramatic lines they created with their reflection, but also because they clearly showed how much conditions had changed since my last visit more than 2 months prior. In that time, we'd not had any significant rainfall, and these reeds were standing testament to the drought conditions that had developed as the previous water level was plainly seen in the lower portion that was bleached nearly white. In processing, I chose to go with a 1x2 crop to counter the severe vertical lines running throughout the image, and I used multiple gradients and radial adjustments to darken the upper and lower areas to draw the eye further into the frame. Having hiked along the trail until I was nearly opposite where I had taken the previous 3 shots, the sunlight was no longer at my back and was filtering beautifully through the leaves of the trees along the water's edge. The water itself was still slightly in shadow, creating a nearly perfect backdrop for the backlit leaves. I worked this area for roughly half an hour, moving around freely with and without my camera, trying different compositions to find an interesting branch structure isolated against the darker water. Although I did take a shot of the composition that first caught my eye as I came upon this location, in the end it's not one that will be added to my portfolio. It's not a terrible shot, it's perfectly fine actually, but this simply speaks to the importance of not letting your feet grow roots into the ground, holding you fast as you fail to explore your surroundings for other possibilities. While exploring, I'm also careful to take into consideration how a scene may look at different focal lengths. In this case, I ended up staying with my 100 or 400mm lens as I wanted to capture the finer details in the trees, but as I tried framing different compositions with my hands as well, it was with thought for the wider viewpoint that would be an option if I were to switch to my 24 to 70mm. The more you remember to approach each scene like this, the more likely you are to make an image that's even better than what you saw when you first arrived. While I was shooting, I had decided I wanted to process my final image in a bright, high-key style to really draw out the colors of the foliage, while also hopefully capturing how the filtered sunlight was lighting up the area. In the end, however, as I looked at this image amidst the others I made this day, I opted to convert it to black and white as the strong yellowish greens just didn't fit in with the style of the other photos. That's not to say I'm discarding the color version, as I'm actually really pleased with how it turned out, but it just simply doesn't fit in with this collection as a whole. This image also required a fair bit more processing as, unnoticed as I shot it, I blew out quite a few small patches of brightly lit leaves that I couldn't fully recover through simple burning to draw down the highlights. I was able to fix many of the spots using the Lightroom healing tool, but for the final touches, I hopped over to Photoshop to leverage its more robust healing and cloning options. I was also careful to remove some distracting elements along the top and right edges of the frame to keep from drawing the viewer's eye away from the main focal point. As we zoom in on the final image, you'll notice a delicate spider's web along the bottom right side. This is yet another example of how taking the time to fully explore a scene can pay off in the end. It was actually seeing the spider web as I tried different options while moving around this relatively small area that drew me to discovering the composition you see here. Were it not for that exploration, this image may not have come about. As with the stark waterline I noted previously on the image of the reeds, these gnarled and twisted tree roots were fully submerged just 2 months ago, and there was no sandy beach present at the time. This was the first image I began to process after returning home, and it set the tone for the entire collection from this day. This was another shot that, as I worked to find my composition, I immediately knew it would be converted to black and white. By this point, the sunlight had grown quite harsh, and it would be difficult to pull out the dramatic details with the added distraction of color, especially the more vibrant greens in the upper part of the frame. These roots, swept back away from the water as they are, made me think of the tattered cloak of a wraith, chasing the water back away from the shore. The 1x2 crop I used here helps reinforce the flow of the roots and the sense of motion I felt upon first seeing them. To help draw you into my own viewpoint, I used local adjustment brushes to dodge and burn lighter and darker areas within the roots, and brought down the exposure once again in a busy background to help focus the eye. That said, I wanted to retain enough detail on the left as I found the tunnel of tree limbs overhanging the shoreline to be an added element of interest. I hope you've enjoyed this different style of video. My goal is to bring you along as I visualize images while in the field and then finalize that vision through the foundational concepts of my post-processing. Let me know what you thought in the comments, ask any questions you may have, and please subscribe and turn on notifications to follow along as I continue to produce more videos. As always, most importantly, take care everybody.
you.